Hey everybody, I'm Greg Soul, and this is Why Am I, a podcast where I talk to interesting people and try and trace a path to where they find themselves today. My guest this go-around is Dawn Meyerriecks. She's a technologist and strategist who's shaped innovation at the highest levels, from modernizing national defense systems to restructuring the CIA's tech arm. She's also a humble and kind storyteller who nurtures everyone around her. It's actually pretty fun to talk to somebody who's truly into and very excited about what they are doing on a day-to-day basis. So I hope you enjoy this chat with Dawn. Dawn, thank you for joining me on the Why Am I podcast today.
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Well, good. I love it when people come in with high expectations so I can crush them. Just stamp out that positive. No, I
That's
love
the
it.
job of every good technologist, actually.
Oh, no, I found you, I found you probably the way a lot of folks find you is I found you on the internet on one of your videos. And I liked your spirit. I liked the way you approach things. You had a smile on your face with everything. And what I seem to recall is a true joy in what you do. And I feel like that's pretty rare these days. So with all of that, I always do this preamble. It's like people don't know who you are. Let me give you a chance to hear who you are. So, Dawn, who are you?
I love this question. I love the premise of the podcast. So I am, I was called a technical teddy bear. And I think what that reflects by one of the people that I worked for, a 4-star that I worked for at one point in my career. And I think what that reflects is that I really do love technology and figuring out how to leverage that on behalf of people and important service. And those two buttons, I love people, I love doing service, and I love technology. So figuring out how to bring those all together just gives me incredible joy.
That's okay. Love people, love technology. I think we may be cut from the same cloth, Dawn. You
Yeah, I
alluded
think
that
so.
you alluded to that earlier, but yeah, that's stuff that's very close to my heart. So you said tech on behalf of other people. What does that mean?
So excuse me, when I worked for AOL, I always used my mom, my poor mom, and say, how do we make the internet accessible for my mom? And that really is in every facet of my career. It's been something that I've been really passionate about. So, how do I make technology work for case officers, for assets in the field, for technical collection, for command and control operations? So if you look at and I've changed jobs a lot for my generation, but that's always been the kind of the calling that I had, is how do I make technology work for important people and important mission?
All right, so you've some glancing blows there, a couple of drive-bys on your crazy background, and you've just lived, I think, several different lives. It sounds like to me. So one is you talked about AOL, which I think like any of the Gen Zers have no idea what that is. I think have an AOL disc somewhere at the house, just part of my museum. I guess
Collection.
yeah, everybody's got, instant coaster, you're ready to go. But also you talked about officers, like case officers and stuff like that. So give us a little taste of, I guess AOL is probably one of your earliest ones, right? So tell me a little bit about that. How did you end up at AOL?
Yes. So I did the first ever enterprise buy for the Department of Defense when I was the Chief Technology Officer at Defense Information Systems Agency. Sorry, I'm going to try and not use acronyms throughout this whole thing, so I'm going to say a lot of words probably.
Good
Anyway,
luck.
so and we bought Netscape for the certificate servers, because at that time, because I'm just old, all of the web servers for the DoD were open. They were not secured. And we needed something that would scale, that could secure those as well. And we decided to use Netscape because we were using its browser and a bunch of other things. And our first goal was they got progress payments based on how many certificates they could issue. And they kept breaking. We were only trying to get to 2 million, by the way. So this was
Only 2 million.
golden age, only 2 million, right? And so I got to know the Netscape folks and their founders really, really well. And eventually AOL bought Netscape. And I had just consummated what at the time was the first ever enterprise buy that I mentioned, but spent a lot of taxpayer money to get this capability. And AOL is not a product company. It's a service company. So I said to the sales rep, I want to see whoever owns Netscape now. I want their butt in my office. I use different words to make sure that I just haven't abused taxpayers to the tune of millions of dollars. And we met and we had this fabulous conversation. And the head at the time of the tech organization said, "Hey, would you have use for anything that does, short, discrete messages?" And I said, yes, because we were in the middle of the IED wars, or we weren't, but I mean, we were watching our folks go over intersections that we knew had been addressed um, by adversaries, and we couldn't get messages downstream to them because of the tactical protocols that were in use. And so he showed it to me, and I said, "Yeah, if we can make this secure, we can use it like immediately." And that was actually AIM and SMS. So we ended up having a fabulous relationship, and I got the first ever milestone A granted by the Department of Defense. You never want to be first at anything, a big bureaucracy, but we did it. And he called me and said, "Hey, would you come run product strategy for me based on that relationship that we had?" And I said, "Absolutely." So that's how I ended up at AOL.
Golly, that's fascinating. You mentioned the ID awards, and I have no idea what that means.
Oh, the IED for between Desert Storm 1, if I use those words, and Desert Storm 2, so early 90s, late 90s, um, people were putting uh, improvised explosive devices into intersections, and our personnel
Oh,
carriers were not up armored, right? And this was a big Rumsfeld initiative, among others, to get the personnel carriers up armored because people were getting killed.
mm,
And so we could actually, through overhead, could see that this somebody was at an intersection doing something, right before a convoy would come across it. But we had no way of getting reliably getting messages to them to say, like, don't go through that intersection, go off road, whatever it was, stay to the left as you go through, whatever it was. And so we were actively looking for solutions for that. And SMS was a great solution for that. So that's what kind of bonded the two of us in terms of he felt really good about the mission. I felt really good about the tech. Um, Hopefully we saved some lives in the process as well. But yes, that's what we were going after, was trying to wave off people from harm's way.
gotcha. This reminds me of a conversation I had not so long ago about how much we take technology for granted. Essentially, I was talking to somebody who used to own and run a dial-up ISP back in the day, and so we were kind of reminiscing and talking about all that stuff. And it's funny how much I mean, you know, younger generations, I would say, Gen Z and on, just assume, that all this stuff works. And we're talking about like how I used to be afraid that all these young kids were going to come take my job. And it seems like none of them care about taking my job anymore. And I was wondering, it's like, why do I know this stuff so much better? And I think it's because we used to have to fight technology
Yes.
constantly, and it's gotten so much better that we just know, I guess at this point, where all the bodies are buried, or we've
Yeah. And
kind of
it's really
peeked around.
interesting. I've friends in government still to this day, but I remember talking to the guy, the CIO for FEMA, um, the Emergency Management Agency. And, it used to be they had to restore, or they had to make sure there was potable water and food and things like that. And I was talking to him and he said, "Don, you know what one of the big changes is?" I said, "No." He said, like, internet service is now on that short list of must-haves, right? Like, if we're not working on that to restore people's internet service, then they're still calling their congressmen and women. And, it was one of those, to your point, inflection points, right? Where it was like, hey, this is essential to life.
Oh,
And it was,
yeah.
yeah. And that's in our professional lifetimes, to your point.
Oh, yeah. I've owned and operated ISPs for a really long time myself, and I've had people call in, and say, "Yeah, my internet's down." And so, we do a little investigation, and it turns out the whole apartment block has lost power. And they're not complaining about no power, like that the air conditioning's not working. They don't care about any of that, but they're like, "Hey, the internet's not working." It's like, "You don't have any power in your apartment, right?" And they're like, "Yeah." It's like, "Okay. Well, it's become such
Yeah.
a crucial, essential thing." And who would have thought? That's so
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
So golly, you have, or have at least had, fingers in a lot of different pies. It sounded like you kind of got started with government work. How'd you end up there? Who as a
Yeah.
child thinks, "Man, I just can't wait to go work for the government." You know?
Not me. That was a pipe dream. I mean, it never even occurred to me. And if somebody told me I'd be at CIA, I would have laughed out loud. Anyway, um, so when I graduated from college, I went to work for Jet Propulsion Labs, TRW, and then Jet Propulsion Labs, and they were doing to keep the lights on. And this was, I want to say, mid '80s. To keep the lights on, they had taken some Army intel work because there was this idea that tactical communications couldn't be that much different than talking to a satellite on its way to the outer solar system. Could be two more diverse things. However, that was what people thought. And I had a clearance and could fog a mirror at that point. So because I had worked on tactical communication systems, I was actually an expert, at the ripe old age of 23 or something. So they brought me into this program. And while I was there, did a lot of work, but one of the things that we did was a another command and control system for the Army, and we were the test case. And we were at the time what the DoD used to do was they'd have one contractor that they expected to actually be successful, and another one that was sort of the control group, right? So, and they had fly-offs, right? So we were the control group at JPL, and we had half the money and half the time, and we actually delivered. And I won't say who we were competing with, but that team never delivered. So the Army colonel who was responsible for us for our delivery then decided that he needed some help architecturally on some bigger systems. The government had just passed the Intergovernmental Personnel Act. I was the first IPA, as they call them, to the federal government. And I moved from Los Angeles to Washington to be the system architect for this Army system. And from there, I eventually came to the attention of an admiral that ran the DISA that I talked about, and needed that kind of capability. So he hired me into the senior executive service I eventually was the chief technology officer at DISA. And DISA does long haul, and they do data centers, and at that time they did command and control and combat support, teleports, all of those, kind of just the plumbing that the DoD relies on.
It's interesting. So you were at JPL, you had successfully delivered. Did you have any idea that this was going to be successful, or was there no chance that you were going to let this thing fail? Or
Yeah,
tell me about
I mean, that's just been it seemed like a reasonable ask, right? It wasn't
yeah.
rocket science. And the other thing that I learned through that whole process is that really good partial capability is better than not delivering. So we didn't hit 100% of the spec, but what we did hit worked really, really well for the users. And we spent a lot of time with the users. They were actually at the Army War College near PA. And they were a test case. They weren't the actual Army Op Center. It's interesting. Much later, I did an emergency install at the actual Army Op Center when we were going into Grenada, or when we almost went into Grenada. So it came full circle. But they loved what we gave them, and they raved about it to the rest of the Army. And we ended up doing 27 of these systems. So it really got legs. It worked. And we never did get 100% of the requirements satisfied. But what we did get done made a big difference in the quality of service that the officers that use the system got. So it was a big deal.
That's killer. Like, yeah, there's
Yeah, it was
what is
fun.
it? We used to say, working's better than perfect. Because
Right.
because when there's 10 things on fire, sometimes you just gotta, does that work? Okay, let's move on to the next thing, next thing, next thing. Let's keep
Yeah,
it.
and AOL used to always say, always better to ship. Like, stop polishing, ship it. Let's see how it goes, right? Get it to beta users. We'll figure it out.
Oh
So,
yeah, I'm sure you've worked with perfectionists that get trapped into like analysis paralysis, where they're constantly examining, re-examining. It's just like, brother, at some point this has got to go out the door. Let's go. Like,
every scientist I've ever worked with, and the engineers are more pragmatic. The scientists want it to be perfect and rock solid, and all of that. It's like, buddy, like your perfect is different than my perfect. So
oh yeah, oh
we're
yeah.
good. Yeah.
As well as the end user, like their
Yeah.
perfect is probably different than your perfect as well. So
Yes.
you got that successful, got it shipped, and then you said they tapped you to be a system architect. Were you ready for that? Were you prepared? Did you have all the tools available, or were you just
No.
kind of winging it?
No, let's see. Yes, I do a lot of winging it, but I work really hard. I like to think I'm
Mm,
trainable. Um, and I think pretty fearless in terms of, and I love having smarter people than I am work for me, and set them loose and then, enable them to run the field. And so I think that's kind of been a lot of the key to my success is being smart enough to recognize who's smarter than I am. And also people that will bring me like, this isn't going to work, but here's how we should think about it, right? That are just as committed and just as focused on, we can do this. Sure. This is not laws of physics. We can make this work. And so, funnily enough, one of the early things that I was asked to do that I had lived through the throes of was figure out why a particular Oracle application wasn't working. And it was an interaction. This is going to be a little geeky between a very obscure setting. We were using Spark systems, but Solaris and inodes and what Oracle consumed in terms of cursors. I'm sorry, that's very geeky, but I had figured it out the hard way because it wasn't working for me, right? And so I showed up to be the system architect for this team, and they were having this problem with cursors. And I said, and they were running on Spark systems. And I said, what's your inode setting? And from then on, I was like the mountain, right? Like Moses came to the mountain, right? Because they were like, oh, that fixed it. And it was, Greg, it was one of those so weird, sort of like exactly right experience for the problem they were having. And so, I established my tech creds kind of right out of the blocks. And I think there was partly just like, we actually have a government system architect that actually can do tech. I think that was a big part of it too, because that's many government people have never had the opportunity to build something. So, what they know is what the book says, and they're writing contracts, and other people are building things. I had actually bent metal, literally, because I'm old enough. We put the first LAN into Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and bend radius was measured in feet because the copper pipes were like this big around. I'm that old. So they were happy to have somebody who had bent metal, right? And knew. And so they, at that point, they were a lot more like, oh, she can speak our language, so we can have harder conversations with her. So I didn't have to be the expert all the time. I just had to be able to ask the right set of questions with the right set of people around, and we could eventually figure out like, okay, here's some things we could go try. So yeah, just waded in and worked with amazing people.
That's cool. You feel like, especially at such a early age, you feel like you're. I'm trying to put all of my thoughts together here. Like it's an interesting mixture of things that I don't typically see in somebody so young. Because you said you were about 23 when you were doing a lot of this. Like so, your early 20s. Not only were you working with amazingly talented people, but you didn't let imposter syndrome stop you. The idea that this fearlessness that helped kind of push you. It almost sounds like you just knew it would probably work. And so you were out there working towards it. But all of that existing in somebody so young seems so bizarre to me that you were so technically focused, but also so willing to work with people smarter than you. Because also, I see a lot of ego. I'm sure you've noticed the same thing in tech and IT and all that kind of, and also in the government. I've noticed there's a lot of ego there as well. But it sounds like you just didn't bring yours with you and you were just there to get stuff done. It's like, how does all that coalesce into one person at that time?
Yeah. So I won't, I had imposter syndrome. But it manifested itself in like people would ask me to give talks, and I made myself do it because I knew I needed to. And I had
Mm,
mentors that said, you have to do it.
mhm.
If you're going to lead, you can't be quiet. And I am, believe it or not, I'm still an introvert. But I was just always, people were paying me to do this. So I was obligated. If, my word is my law. I felt really strongly like if I say that I'm going to do this, then if there's a way to get it done, we're going to figure it out. Right. And it was just that commitment that we will figure it out. And I love learning. And the best way to learn is to get a really smart person to explain something to you. So, and that's why I love the CIA because, I had one quantum expert, but she was the best in the world and she could explain it in a way that I could understand it well enough, right? And so I've always been very much don't be afraid to ask the question, because it's really important. And it also then reinforces that it's okay to ask the question for other people. And so I won't say that I didn't have imposter syndrome, but that I treated that kind of differently than, leading an effort in order to solve a technical mission problem.
Yeah, you just touched on something that was so fundamentally different. Like once I started practicing that, which was to ask, I'm going to do air quotes here, ask the dumb question, right? Like you're in a room full of people that you're the expert and you ask a very basic question to somebody else in the room. And if you could do that without fear and you just pick up and you move, like we used to have a CFO named Randy. I remember him asking some basic questions. I was like, oh my gosh. It's like this guy is respected by everyone in here and he's allowed to do that. I was like, well, maybe I have permission to do that too, right? So it was these little things. But for me, I had to see other people do that to actually, I guess, get a little bit of courage
Yeah.
in there.
And I guess I had really good, and mostly men, but I had really good mentors. And they said to me, they saw something in me that not sure that I saw. And they would say to me when I had to speak, they would say to me, "Does anybody else in the room know more about this than you do?" Right? And it'd be a system or something that I had worked on, and I would be like, "Well, no." Okay, then you have everything you need, right? And it's okay to say, I don't know, or I'll get back to you. And they really, really pushed me and rehearsed me and were just real proponents, would send me little notes. I'll tell a story because I'm a storyteller, but my first code review, NASA does red teams, tiger teams. and, and I had to build a control loop for a command and control for a communication system. And I had, these five men that probably had between them 300 years of experience. I mean, they were like the old telemetry guys at JPL, right? And so I took all of these notes. I walked them through my design and I took all of these notes and I walked out and I felt like crap because, and one of them walked out with me and I felt like crap because I could barely read my own printout anymore, right? And he said, "So tell me what you see there." And I said, "I made a terrible career move. I'm not good at this." And he's like, "Hang on a second." He said, "Did we have you change anything in your main loop?" I was like, "No." He said, "What we did was we afforded you 300 years of experience of what can go wrong that you don't have the background to know yet. But we didn't change any of your logic. What we did was we raised all of the things that can and will go wrong in space communications. So now you can be prepared for that." And it completely, I mean, he knew enough to walk out with me and say, "No, no, no, you're missing the point," right? And he made it okay. Because I literally was walking out thinking, my parents spent all this money. I have this education. I suck, kind of thing. And he knew that. And he just walked out with me and said, "You're looking at this the wrong way." So, and
That's
it's,
fascinating.
interesting now as I think about it, now I'm paying it forward, right? Now that I have all of that experience, I do a ton of mentoring because I figure like other people poured into me and this is my opportunity because I think that's the mark that you leave. It's the mark that you have on others, the impact that you have on others, to be fearless or to be willing to take on challenges or to give them, like let's ask these three questions and see where that gets us.
Yeah, and to that end, I feel like that's the greatest legacy any of us can leave. Like I've said this a million times before, but I'll never have a building with my name on it, right? But I feel like my legacy is going to be through all the people that I've touched and influenced and impacted. And I was reading a little piece the other day, and it was saying that we as humans control absolutely nothing, but we affect absolutely everything. So I like that kind of clicked something in my brain to where now I see every opportunity with another person as that opportunity to affect, right? For good, hopefully in some positive way.
Absolutely. Can I tell another story? Because I'm
I
seeing
want you to desperately, yes.
okay, all right. So I'm also a big believer in the butterfly effect, the power of one. The command and control system that I helped build when I was at DISA, we had it's called a common operational picture. It shows you where the good guys are, the bad guys are, and people that we don't know whether they're good or bad. And in order to do that, you need to have what we call red, which is the where are the adversaries on the battlefield. And so we had to cut a deal to get access to intelligence databases. So I cut a deal with Keith Alexander, who was the J2, the intel chief at Central Command at the time. And I went down to see how they were doing, and he gave me access to the data. I gave him the system because I was only supposed to be supporting the operators, which are the J3, but I cut a deal. It was kind of an in-kind trade that I could get through legal. I had great attorneys too. Anyway, so I go down to see how they're doing. And he said, I want you to talk to this young major here because he did some interesting work this morning. And so the young major's showing me what it was that they did. And what they had detected was there were Afghanis with surface to air missiles waiting for some of our C-130s to come through a gap,
Mhm.
who were going in to support the Afghan government at the time against the Russians. And what he didn't know is that my little brother was the squadron commander of that C-130 brigade.
Wow.
um, and he was either on some of those planes or was commanding the people that were on those planes on their way in. And so it was one of those moments where I was like, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And you never know who or what you're impacting. And in that case, it became very personal to me because that was my baby brother who has 4 children. And that would have been a devastating loss to us, to the family, but also to the nation. And by cutting that deal, figuring out how to get that deal cut, you know, I saved either my baby brother or some of his squadron mates. So we all make a huge difference. And so, I think people count themselves out. We'll never know, right? But at least in my case, I feel like at this point in my life, it's pouring into others that makes the biggest impact in terms of the experiences that I've had. So thank you for letting me tell that story.
Oh, that was incredible. That was incredible. And it's not just your brother, it's
Yeah,
hundreds of people like him, thousands, and then give it a little bit of time and that's millions that
yeah,
are absolutely impacted. That's so amazing. Yeah, that's it's so funny. Yeah, because I've like kind of my my Marvel origin story sort of comes around IT and stuff like that. And so much of what we do, you can't talk to normal people about it. I
yep,
mean, in your case, I think a lot of what you did has been classified and obviously, has to be censored and all that stuff. But even still, even if it's not, people just don't know what we do. They don't understand it. And we can't always, I don't know. I think a lot of us have trouble translating it into a way that other people can really understand. That seems to be one of your great gifts, and it's something I've been honing for a really long time. But genuinely, it's folks like that that change the world on a daily basis, sometimes imperceptibly. You never see it. Like again, my origin story is I did a lot of heavy internet routing in my youth. And I would see those BGP tables change across the globe, like one little change here and I could see it ripple. And I was literally controlling the flow of information across the planet, right? And so there's thousands of IT people doing stuff like this all the time, just hidden in the background that nobody will ever know, and I think they probably discount their impact that they have on
yes,
the world.
yes. I couldn't agree more. And that they are unsung heroes that enable the rest of us to just take for granted all of the many things that we have access to and that we are able to access. And that's why that's what I tell people all the time is whether anyone else appreciates what you do or not, thank you. And what you do matters. And I think too often people feel like they're nameless and faceless and it doesn't matter. And none of that's true. Think about just the way the internet's architected. If there weren't a bunch of people enabling it, it wouldn't work, right? And most people, they treat it like running water, right?
100%.
I tell people like nobody wants to talk about the sewer or the plumbing, but man, take their water away and then they care, right? So I think there's just a ton of people that are working at infrastructure levels and it's terribly hard to sell. That was my big challenge, was always, figuring out how to explain something to leaders that they were interested in investing in, particularly in government. And it was always trying to come up with those, examples that they would actually care about, and do it in a way that you weren't talking down to them. To your point, right? That it wasn't, but making it accessible in a way that was real.
Yeah. And I know it's got to be difficult too cuz I'm in I've finally arrived, I've made it into tech sales. And so I deal with people all over the place, but a lot of what I get to do is just helping people, which
Yeah.
makes it so easy. Like I have things that actually genuinely make people's life better, and I can help them in different ways. And so I get to be on the heavy technical side of doing all that stuff. But I get to work with like government customers as well, and researchers, like some people in like nuclear research or cancer research. I get to deal with all these people, and I see how I don't know the best word to describe it. Maybe this delicate relationship or this delicate balance they have with getting budget from people because they have to justify their existence and why the research they're doing is so important, which is crazy. Like I've literally spent 10 years at university becoming a PhD in this thing and I've dedicated my life to it. Now I have to explain it to another person that doesn't understand it in the least, why this is so important, and that has to be incredibly difficult, especially, like, I think about government with, like, political shifts, which can from, in the span of a month, have a completely different tone and flavor to how they wanna put money towards things, and that's gotta be just a wild relationship with, like, your existence.
Yeah, I mean that's one is that's how you learn to be a storyteller, I guess, and benefit by examples that are real, right? Not just made up things. I will also say that the 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 priorities, how things are done, shift between administrations, but what is done is less of a shift, right? The
Mm.
priorities, clearly there's an emphasis, which I'm grateful to see on tech kind of across the board and how national security and national economic security vis-a-vis tech is intertwined. So there are less of those kinds of like, why is tech important conversations, which was the early part of my career. Now it's like, well, of the thousands of things we could worry about, which three should we be focused on? And so one of the things that I do right now is I'm a commissioner on the National Security Commission on Emerging Biotech. So I'll jump on that bandwagon for just a second. It was my number one worry bead when I was at CIA was what could happen with synthetic biology, because it's like cyber. Biology is everywhere, and it's so broad that it's nearly impossible to what do you pay attention to? So what we've been doing, and I was part of a team that briefed one of the executive branch agencies this morning. What we're trying to do is kind of sensitize whole of government to what we think will be the equivalent of a chat GPT moment in the next 3 to 5 years with some form of biology, right? Whether it's food security, whether it's pharmaceuticals, whether it's energetics, kind of, and put in what I've referred to as the federal highway system, so that you want to go to Seattle, I want to go to LA. Can we put enough infrastructure in that people will invest so that both of us can achieve our goals without knowing necessarily, when or how? And so that's a lot of what we've been working on is nobody's going to, spend $1 billion doing a 1 million-gallon fermenter. So is that something government could do so that venture capital and equity can make investments to scale biology? Because we know how to do a lot of things biologically. What we haven't worked out is the engineering to scale it effectively and efficiently. And so I think and there's an arms race, right? China is clearly working on this. And so we're trying to, again, back to my storytelling. We're working with Congress. We're actually a commission out of the Senate Armed Services Committee. But then at the end of the day, the executive branch has to execute that. So we've been spending a lot of time. We finished our report in April. We were given another 18 months to socialize, everybody to what it is that we were recommending and why. So we're in the throes of doing that right now. But it's the same thing. We're coming up with the why you should care about this when everything else is also something you should pay attention to.
Yeah. Well, when you mentioned biotech and then the Armed Services Committee, you make it sound like something's going to be weaponized. But then you were talking about like solving food scarcity, like things like that. Is that what you're about, like food engineering?
Yeah, the Senate Armed Services Committee kind of raised it because it's been a priority for the Chinese, and with more of a question of like, what are we doing here, and what should we be paying attention to? Not with we have signed treaties and we're not going to weaponize in spooky ways because that just doesn't comport with our values. But it's more um, the the work that we see. For example, we see our cattle innovation has gone to Argentina because our regulatory environment sorry to be geeky again, but treats CRISPR, which is, inserting a
Hmm.
different set of genes
Yeah, gene editing.
differently
Yeah.
than Linnaeus, speeding up Linnaeus. So if you want a cow to be less water dependent, you can actually flip bits in the gene, right, in the gene pool in order to make that happen without growing, 35 generations of cows, right? Um, our regulatory environment treats those identically, which we think is problematic, and which causes investors to wave off because they're like, well, this, we have no idea when we can actually get to market. So what's happened is those innovators, the cattle innovators, have gone to Argentina, who has made a different decision in their regulatory environment, which is like, if you're speeding up Linnaeus, that's not the same as CRISPR at all. And we're going to treat that like it's like you did 30 generations of cows as opposed to, monkey genes in cows. And those are the kinds of things that we see that we think could be addressed so that we maintain innovation and also our cattle market, for example, here or in countries that are friendly to us, right? So those are the kinds of things that we saw as we looked at this. And obviously, we know, for example, that the Chinese really don't like the Hmong among them. Is it possible that something's being done there? I don't know, but somebody should be paying attention, right? Or I'll pick on avian flu and the price of eggs, or spotted lanternfly and vineyards. I mean, there have been a set of these things where we think it's serendipitous. It'd be nice to pay attention, right? Because it hits markets in huge ways. Um, and we should at least be looking to make sure that others are not going after us with, continuous upheaval that destabilizes.
So it's most of your work trying to affect policy.
In this particular mission that I'm doing right now, yes, it's a policy because it's legislative, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah, it's what it sounds
for me,
like.
a very weird. I mean, I grew up kind of around the executive branch, so it's kind of interesting to be on the legislative side. So it really is about half of what we recommended is in draft, either it has been legislated or is in draft legislation, and we're working on the rest. That's another reason we were around for, a little while to make sure that we get as much of the national highway system for bio in place as possible before we turn into pumpkins. Most of the rest of my work is still in and around the executive branch and technology implementation. But when I was at CIA, this was my number one worry bead. So when I got the call from the senator to act as a commissioner, I thought, man, this will be maddening. But it's actually, the staff is great. It's been really, really fun. And it's been really good as we talk to people because we have had good bipartisan support for making sure that we take this on at a national level.
How is it that you keep getting called upon from all these disparate places? Like, how have you become this focal point that everybody just keeps coming towards? Like,
I'm
I
old.
know you're down in the street with a megaphone shouting how important and cool you are. It's like, how do you do such good work that people just come to you like that?
Um, let's see. I have a huge network, partly because I'm old, but partly because I just love people like you do. And so, if somebody calls, I try to get to yes. If somebody calls to be mentored, if hey, do you want to do this tiger team? So the way this one came about was a chief of staff who used to work for somebody who worked for me watched me operate. And so when he got named to the commission and they were asking about who else should be on, he was like, oh, I have a name for you. Right. And it really is the network. And I think a lot of engineers miss that, that perhaps others are better equipped. Your network is amazingly important. And probably like you, I haven't looked for a job for like my last 3 jobs, right? People called me. And so what I tell people is never burn a bridge. DC is a small place. Actually, the people that know what's going on technically is a relatively small group compared to, the world population. And eventually you will be, it's like that 3 degrees of separation or 7 degrees of separation. I think it's actually smaller than that. And so it's really keeping that network alive. And the other thing I think that's really interesting is that engineers can work together. If they've solved a hard problem before, 20 years later, I'll take a call from that engineer because I know what they're about, right? And it's not like I have to keep that relationship warm all the time, right?
Mhm.
Maybe I liked something they posted on LinkedIn or Facebook or what, to really date myself. Um, but I mean, there's not a constant, because I've heard other people that are, hey, I make sure I touch everybody in my Rolodex once every 6 months or something. I don't do that. Um, I, you know, I don't want to waste their time, and I frankly don't have the time. But I also don't have any problem calling somebody that I worked with 20 years ago and saying, hey, I've got this thing. If you're not the right person, can you refer me? And that network is so powerful. So,
Yeah, the people piece is something I neglected for way too much of my career, and it has become the most powerful piece, kind of later in life here. But I I heard that sometimes somebody told me there's like three types of friends. There's a friend that will take from you and never give back. There's a friend that will give and never ask for anything or expect anything in return, and then there's people like me who expect it to be reciprocal, like a transactional relationship. So everybody I'm friends with, I will do anything for them anytime they need it, but there's always this expectation that, hey, if I need something, you're going to help me. And so I think because I maintain those types of relationships, I can not talk to somebody for 3 years and I can call them up and immediately they're like, yeah, what do you need? I'm here to help you. And I still take those calls too. Right. So I'm always happy to help. Like you said, if you have time, I think somebody is important and elevated as you are probably has far less time than I do, but I have the luxury of being able to say yes to just about anything. And it's so funny, I'll say that, and then nobody comes to me. I think the bald thing, it scares people away. It's, it's my keep things, even card that I like to play. But also you mentioned never burn a bridge. I'm a big, advocate for that too, and I never talk bad about a previous employer or anything they do or any competitor. I never talk trash about them because I feel like to me, that just shows me what you're gonna do, to me when I'm not in the room. So I always try and be above board and all that stuff. And it's funny because I've left jobs before because of very
mhm.
bad managers, and I have subsequently had those managers 2 years later call me and ask me if I want a job. And I'm like, no, I'm really good. Thank you very much. But it just goes to show it's like you never know. So I try and always keep that in mind. Though of course that wasn't always a priority for me. And
Yeah.
um I think so many people, especially in tech, right? I've worked for Red Hat. I'm sure you're familiar with Red Hat. And
Yep. I have a red hat
all right, I do
from the
too.
CEO of Red Hat.
All right. All right. Always just flex on me, Don. Flex on me. No, but I had never met so many neurodivergent people in one place at one single time. And I actually got to work with kind of the neurodivergence community there. Um, and yeah, it's funny. It's funny how few of those people leverage the human piece because
Yeah.
they think they think in numbers, they think in bytes, like they're arranging their outfits based on you know, hex. I don't know. They're not accustomed to communicating with other people and how powerful that can be not only in your career but enriching your life. How much better life gets when you start maintaining
Yeah.
those relationships.
I used to talk a lot about, and I still do when I'm asked to speak about extending grace, because we all have bad days. I have days, I used to walk in, there'd be days I'd walk into the CIA and it'd taken me 3 hours to get to work. And I would say, I'm not fit to be around. Have somebody else take my first meeting so I can calm down and, take a walk or whatever I need to do to clear my head. And we don't know what the people are going through that are sitting across the table from us, right? And so it never hurt me to just think, oh, they're having a bad day, right? Or there's something going on that, that I don't know. And I'm going to assume that if this is out of character, right? And I hope that people will do the same for me, right? Because I think particularly now, but I mean, even before I retired from the agency, we had COVID going on, we had a bunch of things going on. It was just like, hey, we're going to start from the premise that we're all here to get mission done, and nobody's here to be a toad in the road. And that may take grace some days, maybe probably every day right now. And also to yourself, right? Like it's okay to say, I need this hour to calm myself down, right? Like I should not show up and be ugly.
Yeah. I think I heard Brene Brown say something about being a good friend. It's like you're going to forgive them, you're going to give them grace, right? So part of being a good friend is you have to give yourself that same grace.
Right.
It's like so hard to do though
And
sometimes.
you can't pour out what you don't have.
100%.
So if you're not giving yourself some grace to be a human being, then you're probably not going to have anything left over for anybody else. And so there are those times, and because that was the other piece, is you need to replenish that. Whatever it is that pours into you, if you're starving yourself of that, eventually that's going to manifest in your attitude, your health, a whole bunch of other things. So, finding that place where you can replenish is really, really important, I think, to be able to do that for others.
So, this insane curiosity that you carry inside your body that evidently guides you so strongly, has this been like your ever present companion? Has this been since you were a child, or where did this come from?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I just can't ever not remember not being curious about things and being, willing to explore and create, and being kind of fearless from that perspective. Not being kind of, I definitely was fearless from that perspective. And I just love, I love learning. I mean, there's, even at my age now, I was, it's like I'm looking at like, should I go back and get a degree in something, just to force myself to the discipline of like going through that. And not that it's going to be, something that I'm going to apply, other than because I'm interested in it, right? And being around smart people, experts in anything. I just I was involved in a class with young attorneys, and the class was taught by one of the professors was a sitting Supreme Court justice. And it was one of those things where I was supposed to be running this ancillary thing on the side, right, for 2 of the days I was there. And I was like, well, can I come to the lectures? And they thought I was crazy. But can you imagine taking a law course from a Supreme Court justice? I mean, it was just one of those, and I learned so much. And they were just like, we can't believe, because it was in a really nice city, not here in the States. And they were like, everybody else, like when they're not teaching, are out like touring around. And I was like, I can't imagine not taking, a couple hours a day to listen to a Supreme Court justice talk about how he approaches the interpretation of the Constitution. Like I can't believe I don't have to pay for this, right? I guess I hadn't thought about that till you said it, but they were so surprised. It was like we've never had an adjunct actually show up for the lectures. I was like, I bought the textbook. I was like, I wasn't reading it because man, they spent a lot of time reading, but I was like flipping through the textbook, because it was just so interesting to me. Separation. The class was on separation of powers between the three branches, and then he talked about the difference between a contextual judge, which is what he considers himself, and the other models. And it was just fascinating, right? And it was like after all these years, I had a better understanding of why our lawyers, for example, at CIA, made us do some of the things we had to do.
Did it change the way you think about some things, or like a held opinion? Did you actually adjust your understanding?
It did change the way I thought about what I had interpreted as doing push-ups till we puke kind of punitiveness about attorneys, in terms of particularly government attorneys, in terms of why, I had 1,000 questions to answer when I was trying to get approval to do an operational act of some sort. And it really clarified for me, because there's a couple of things. One is if you use technology and then you have to prosecute, then it makes it discoverable. So you have to explain it to a judge. It then becomes a matter of public record. You compromise your tech, right? And we've had instances of that where the CIA helped law enforcement, and the tech became well known and ineffective for our purposes. And the second one is if there's ever a prosecution, then where are we? Right? In terms of, did we do all of the due diligence? Can we show that we comported with the prevailing sentiment regarding the interpretation of the law at the time? And oh, by the way, that changes administration to administration. So then that puts our people in varying legal statuses based on whether or not, like post 9/11, there was a lot of appetite for certain things. 20 years later, not so much, right? And so being able to understand that the law is actually flexible from that perspective, but then that means that the individuals that acted at the time may now be, called on the carpet, and what that means in terms of, for example, CIA officers who participated in those things early on. It was. I mean, I had never thought that through completely. It was just like, why are the attorney? Why am I answering this set of questions now? And I actually get like there's the National Security Council has a lawyers group, and that's partly what you go through in order to get permission to do certain operational acts, right? Which is not just, is it okay now? But in 20 years, to the extent that you can future proof, right? In 20 years, if the sentiments are different, can we still go back to, interpretation of the Constitution and existing bodies of law and say this in fact comported with our value, and I'll pick on my mom again, in a way that my mom would say, oh yeah, I get why they thought that was okay, right?
Yeah, that's wild. That is so much you have to maintain. Like you mentioned something there that like if you use a piece of tech or a new method and you actually want to use that in a legal case, it has to be, I mean, you have to show it up. So that becomes very tricky. It's like, how do I know I want to essentially, because I'm assuming some of this, as soon as it's out in the wild, people are like, oh, I'm going to completely avoid that thing that might, yeah, yeah. So it's like, how do you know it's the right time? It's like, is this one important enough? Do I need to save it for the next one? Or should I save it for this other one that we're, holy cow, that's so complicated.
Yeah, and this is, and I'll say what it is because it's been out there for a long time now. But spoofing cell towers was something that we did
Mm,
early on, right, to capture cell phones. Um, and so we helped a law enforcement organization use it to pinpoint bad guys. I mean, we gave it to them so that they could pinpoint bad guys. CIA does not do that in the U.S. There's U.S. Persons Protection. But they came back to us and said, hey, the judge thinks this is, magic. So we're going to have to explain how it works. And at that point, we were like, because otherwise they were not going to be able to prosecute the individual, right? And that's when we went, okay, got it. But now it's going to be, it will eventually leak out. And sure enough, right? Bad guys figured out what we were doing, and that's why they got really much better protocols around how to use cell phones, for example, right?
mm.
So,
But like just the idea that this curiosity you maintain, and what the reason I asked you, did it actually change your opinion? It's the fact that I've noticed as people get a little bit older, and I am actively railing against this and fighting against this for myself, is that as we get older, we seem to get a little bit more set in our ways and a little bit less likely to change our opinions, the way we think about things. And the fact that you are not only so excited about learning new stuff that part of the process is like, "Oh, I'm changing the way I think, the way I feel about something." It feels like such a rarity, Dawn, that it just like it screams at me, and it makes me have hope for the world and humanity as a whole that people still want to learn. I had the opportunity to do some work in Madison, Wisconsin a couple of years ago, and I ended up was just walking around. and walked to the Capitol. It's a beautiful city. It was kind of the spring, and I ended up just continuing to walk, and I found myself on campus, and I started up a conversation with somebody, as one like
yeah.
us does. You're just going to talk to people, and he was telling me how they've made it so that in Madison, the University of Madison, if you get to retirement age, you can audit any class you want for free. You can show up at any
Love that.
time. Dude, I was like, "That is so brilliant." He said, "Yeah, we learned that, during those really cold winter months, a lot of our older population were getting really lonely. It was becoming, like, pretty problematic, and so we found out that, if we started this program, just, I guess, little child program, that it actually had these huge benefits." And I was thinking, "I would love that now." I'm not even of retirement age. I would love to be able to go and audit like, that excites the crap out of me. Like, it genuinely does. The ability to just go and learn something new from somebody, like, that's an expert in their field. I would absolutely adore the ability to do that, and it also made me wonder, it's like, why don't we do more of that? Why is it such a behind lock and key,
Yeah.
like, knowledge?
I love that. That's you make me hopeful. I'm going to go see if there's anything local here like that I can do. And the other thing I'll say, based on that class and others, because I work with a lot of young people now, we're in good hands. This next generation and the subsequent ones, they're just as motivated. They're just as smart. They are different. Like I see in my own kids, that they are much more socially conscious in terms of critical resources and things like that than my generation was. And I think that's all to the good. This idea that somehow there's a crop of lazy, like everybody gets a trophy, and that they're not willing to work hard and be real experts in what they do is, I think, just a load of crap. We should not buy into that, because that does not match my lived experience with these young people that I did the my sidebar class with. We had amazing conversations in terms of the depth and breadth of the questions that they asked. They were on it. They clearly got it. And I was, I love doing these things anyway, but I just like, it's such a shot in the arm in terms of, optimism.
So I'm in College Station. I get to go to
Oh,
Texas A&M
nice.
and kind of guest to do some stuff and help out, do some lectures occasionally and help out with some different stuff. And there is something about being around all of those young people that are genuinely curious and are learning that just, I don't know, man, it makes me feel young. It reinvigorates me.
Yeah, that was my experience too. Like I hung out with them for hors d'oeuvres and dinner and things like that, and it was just it was fabulous. I could have been touring the city, but I had a much better time hanging out with these folks.
Yeah, yeah. And like, I don't know, they ask great questions. They're
They
curious
do.
about things that I would have never even thought of. And I don't know, I
Yeah.
love it. I love
I
the
get
way
to
they think.
yeah, I get to teach a class. Part of my uh, when you retire from, at least from the CIA, you have 3 months of, they call it transition time. And so I helped revamp a class for our baby senior intelligence service. That's not what the class is called, but it's a class for them as they become members of what would be the equivalent of the flag or general officer level in the U.S. military. And I do that in residence at one of our black sites once a quarter. It is the best thing ever, right? Getting to hang out with them. It's in a classified setting, so we can talk about anything. I also, coincidentally, am the keeper of the key for the bar. So we have really great conversations. And it reinvigorates me. I mean, we're in good hands, and it's my pleasure to be able to hang with them for a week and just, I call it loving on them, uh, to just, have the good conversations and connect and I told them it's like, it's my mental health week as well as, like, getting to spend time. We get to spend time together. So good
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. Don, I could literally keep talking to you. You are such a fascinating human, and I have
Oh,
nothing
so
but
are
questions.
you. I
You
This
have
has been
so
fun.
many great stories. I love it, and I have. There's no secret. I've always loved people to tell me stories, and you are the perfect combination of technology and story. So I absolutely enjoy it. So I want to be very respectful of your time. And again, thank you so much for the gift of your time to begin with here. But
Oh, thank
is
you.
there
Thanks for
in
doing this, Greg. I love that you do this. So, and I love that you're a technologist too, because I don't have to translate.
Oh, no, 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 no. Sometimes, I can play the dumb guy when I need to.
Me
And
too.
which is all the
Dumb
time.
chick in my case. Yep.
But right here at the end, is there anything you'd like to promote? Do you have anything coming up? Anything you'd like to steer people towards, or how you'd have them interact with you, or any of that? Let them have it. What you got?
Yeah, no, I'm on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from people. Mean that sincerely. It may take a little while, but I have a real passion for this area, tech and supporting people. So I mean very sincerely that I'd be happy to be connected. And Greg, thank you for doing this. This has been fabulous. You lived up and exceeded all of the billing. So appreciate it.
Yes, man. Well, let me hit stop on this stuff real quick.